This is Len Edgerly. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles. Today is Friday, March 6th, 2020, and I'm recording this in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We headed to Cambridge sooner than expected because of the coronavirus outbreak and uncertainty about what travel was going to be like. And actually, I think it was a week ago that I recorded the last episode and was let you know that we were just about headed to the airport. At that time, I decided I wasn't going to go to South by Southwest, the conference in Austin, because of uncertainty about the virus, and that was based on good advice that I received from author A.G. Riddle. And Jerry said, with that many people headed to Austin, the virus is likely to be in attendance. And we heard today that the Austin city government made that same decision and basically told South by Southwest that it was not going to be able to have the conference this year. It was going to be starting in about a week from today. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show. The interview this week is one I'm really excited to bring to you. It's a conversation with Steven Levy, who has a book that was published last week on, February 25th, Tuesday. The title is Facebook, The Inside Story, and it's a book that he worked for 3 or 4 years on with unusual access to Facebook officials from Mark Zuckerberg on down. And when he started the book, Facebook was in a more benign period of its history before Cambridge Analytica and some of the shocking misuse of people's data that has come to light since then. And he continued his reporting. So the book ends up being a combination of the history, which is a great story, founded in a dorm here in Cambridge at Harvard, not far from here, but then getting into this period where the size and scale of the network created by Facebook, over 2 billion people connected now, uncovered real flaws in the ability of the company to protect the people on that network from various problems, from tampering with elections to hate crimes to all kinds of bad things. So you'll hear about the book in my conversation with Steven. I want to tell you a little bit about him to set the stage. He is now serving as editor-at-large at Wired magazine, and he was chief technology writer and a senior editor at Newsweek. He has published 7 previous books, including In the Plex, How Google Thinks, Works, and Shapes Our Lives. That was published in 2011. Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution, 2010. And a classic book that he has updated since it was first published, Insanely Great, The Life and Times of Macintosh, the computer that changed everything. One thing that's notable as this book has come out is the praise that other authors and media have given to Steven. One that I particularly like is by Brad Stone, who's also one of the top American technology journalists and wrote kind of the definitive book about Amazon, the Everything Store. Brad wrote, Steven Levy is the founding guru of technology journalism. Few other writers can harness both access to top figures and critical insight informed by decades of reporting on Silicon Valley. His Facebook book will be a blockbuster, a penetrating account of the momentous consequences of a reckless young company with the power to change the world. San Francisco Chronicle wrote, Levy is the dean of tech writers. Facebook's brass gave him the run of the C-suite. The result is even-handed and devastating. An NPR review said an exhaustive and well-paced history. Levy's account of Zuckerberg's abbreviated Harvard tenure and Facebook's early years feel fresh with plenty of color that reminds you the HBO show Silicon Valley did not have to reach far for its satire. One thing about the book that I think you'll enjoy is it's really well written. Levy has a background in English. He's comes at his work as a tech writer with real cred and skill as a writer. Some of the descriptions of people and settings have a writerly feel to them. Very fresh writing and really effective. Booklist wrote, respected tech writer Levy presents the definitive story of Facebook. This absorbing book will inspire important conversations about big tech and privacy in the 21st century. And then Casey Newton, writing in The Verge, wrote, if you want to know why Facebook is the way it is, how its leaders think, what their blind spots are, and why the company's plans have so often gone awry, the Inside Story is an excellent starting place. I highly recommend it for anyone who wants a comprehensive, reality-based account of the company's first 16 years. I reached Steven in California. He was on a couple of stops on his book tour out there, and I began by asking him why he thinks it's important that readers understand this company, Facebook, at this particular time in history.
Facebook, it could be the most important company, in technology, one of the most important companies in the world. It affects our lives, whether we're on Facebook or whether we're not on Facebook. It has an impact on the world. It's gathered more people than any other network has. If it were a country, it would be by far the biggest country in the world. So we need to know about it. We need to know who did it and how they did it and what its problems are and how they came about and how they're trying to fix it.
You, I think, were given pretty amazing access to Zuckerberg and the whole team because of your reputation for being a fair journalist. When you were approaching them, I think it was back in 2015, it seemed like it took several months before they gave you the green light to do it. Do you have any sense of how they weighed the pros and cons of taking you into that close a look at the company over that long a time to write a book?
Well, I'm not in their heads, but I'll tell you what I told them, why they should do it. One thing was, referring to what I just said before, this is a really important story. And I told them this is part of history. No one's done this before. And even if they don't pick me, they should pick someone who's an outsider, who has no obligation to them, to tell the story. And, they should let someone in there to tell the story independently, just for history's sake, if nothing else.
Do you think that any of the people deciding would have looked at Brad Stone's book about Amazon, the Everything Store, and said, well, did that turn out well for Amazon or not? I mean, Mackenzie Bezos didn't think it turned out so well with her famous one-star review. Do you think that was a kind of a model or something that they would look to and say, well, how will this turn out for us?
Well, they did have a model. I wrote a book about Google before, and it had its criticisms. But overall, it did what I told Facebook my book would do, is it would explain the company. Recently Mark Zuckerberg said that I want to be understood. I don't necessarily want to be liked. And I think this book actually fulfills that desire. People can now understand Facebook. They might not like it. They may not like it now, and this isn't an argument in favor of Facebook, but it is the story. And I tell it like a story. It's a history. Besides its importance, I also think it's a really interesting story to read. And I tried to make it read like a novel, only everything is true.
In my reading of it, it improved my attitude toward Facebook, because my attitude toward Facebook was pretty much informed by the Social Network movie in 2010, and Zuckerberg certainly doesn't come across looking very good in that movie. Is there a reason that the view of Facebook and Zuckerberg in that movie is different than what you get if you read almost 600 pages of your book?
Yeah, it's different because the movie is like a fictional portrayal. It's based on some facts, but it's not factual. If the screenwriter Aaron Sorkin had a choice between doing something dramatic that wasn't true and sticking to what was true, he chose what was dramatic. So you can't mistake a movie for reality. And this is an exercise in fact. So I did to my best of my abilities, and I have employed some fact checkers to help keep me honest. What you read in this book is the truth. And what I did was I put together this story according to where the facts took me.
When you started, it was sort of pre the troubles that Facebook ran into with Cambridge Analytica and all the rest. And so during your reporting, the story seemed to change. In the midst of that, I could imagine corporate PR people saying, whoa, this is not a great time to be having this fair-minded journalist hanging around. Did you have a sense that there was a moment there where they might have pulled the plug and said this just isn't the right time to be doing this?
It's a good question to know whether they would have given me this access if I approached them in the middle of all these problems. So if I started this book in 2018, I doubt that they would have given me this kind of access. But once I was in, it was clear I was going to do the book. I was going to do it after a certain point, with or without their cooperation. I felt that with their cooperation, they kept talking to me, they had a better chance of getting their point of view across. And of course, I would quote them, and you could take the quotes yourself and see, are they being sincere? Are they giving him the whole truth? The context of the quotes, as you say, the book's 500 pages. So if they, Zuckerberg says, he says in the end, well, I think in some ways we've been good for privacy. You have the information to know that's a ridiculous statement.
Well, let's talk about some of the topics that people will learn about, or I learned about. The news feed, introduced in 2006, you call it Facebook's biggest boon and also the source of its future woes. Let's what did you mean by that, and what's the importance of news feed to Facebook?
Well, news feed was introduced in 2006, and pretty much in tandem with this other pivotal move on Facebook's part, which was to open itself up beyond students to the world at large. And this was a huge move. It was remaking the company. And I got hold of a notebook that Zuckerberg was writing his plans on about this and sharing his vision for Facebook, his secret thoughts about how to design these products. And it really was a transformation of Facebook that changed it from something that was almost like a digital implementation of a book, where you would go to a page and see someone's profile, like a physical Facebook, and see someone's picture and a few words about them, and then you turn to another page and look at it. This became something that it was a stream of information pushed to you about this. So the change in status, where a picture that someone posted would be, just like thrust in front of your face. And a lot of people felt that was a privacy violation, and people objected to it. And Zuckerberg lasted out that storm. He felt the people would love it once they got used to it. And indeed, that happened. But the newsfeed also, as it evolved, became a home for much more than the content of what your friends were doing. If your friends wanted to share some controversial content with you, or something stupid, some cute puppy pictures, or a video of a watermelon blowing up after 800 rubber bands were put around it, you'd see that. And then if that stuff had enough engagement, even the farthest reaches of your social network be able to get in front of you and leap past things that might have been more relevant to you about your life in order to show these kinds of stories on Facebook newsfeed. And I felt that degraded the quality of it, but it showed you stuff that you couldn't resist clicking on. And that was toxic, but it was also a home for things like false news. It turned out to have a very desultory effect on democracy, really. So so the Facebook newsfeed, while it helped popularize Facebook and became addictive, we spend time on Facebook because of it, also housed a lot of damaging material that now people are calling Facebook to account for.
Well, and there's several times in the story where Zuckerberg toughs out an initially bad reaction to something that he's done that really sort of pushes the privacy norms, and he's assuming that privacy norms can change, will change, generally in the direction of people being willing to give up their privacy in return for what they get. Do you think we're approaching a time when there could be a return back to earlier norms of privacy, or do you, in what you've seen, see this as kind of a relentless unfolding toward diminished norms of privacy?
That's a good question. One thing that happened, during your account of, I think, very accurate, of him pushing out these products was, in a lot of these cases, most of them really, there were people at Facebook, his top lieutenant, saying, "Don't do this, Mark. This is a bad idea." And sometimes they would even tell him, "This is a wrong idea. I don't think that morally this is a great idea." And he would push forward. He'd figure he'd apologize later or fix it later if people complained. And if the FTC ruled against him and confined him, he'd pay the fine. I think that, in a sense, he's responding to this by what he's calling a privacy-focused vision. He's putting more of an emphasis at Facebook on some of the properties he acquired, Instagram and WhatsApp. At a certain point, some years ago, they broke off the messaging function inside Facebook's Blue app, the main app, and forced you to sign up for Messenger, which was the chatting messaging program inside of Facebook. So by doing something that was pretty unfriendly to users, saying, in order to keep using Facebook as you know it, you have to install this new app. They built a billion person property doing that. So Zuckerberg now says, well, I'm going to give you back this privacy. This is encrypted stuff. Other people can't read it. And you'll be able to go back to something which is, less of a town square, as he describes it, and more of a living room experience.
The other trend which he keeps invoking is that the world is better off if we're all connected, that there's 2 billion people connected to Facebook now. It's going to be even better in kind of an existential sense when the next few billions are connected. And you point out in the book that there's a pretty tricky complexity here, because the people that were pushing growth for growth's sake within the company, they could kind of invoke that same idealistic reason that growth is good because connecting the world is good.
Right.
And I guess on the connecting the world is good, do you think he's right that the world is just better off if we're all connected, that there's a right to be connected, or is that kind of a flawed premise, never mind whether it's a self-serving one?
Yeah, I'll address that second. But first, about the growth thing, you're right. What happened was that because the idea was that if the world is connected, it's a good thing. That means that growth is a good thing. So growth, anything we do for growth is fine because it serves that larger mission. And in terms of profit, anything we do to make money is important, not because necessarily we want to, be the most profitable company in the world, though that wouldn't be so bad, they figure, but because that'll give us more money to grow, which will help us connect the world. So if you do things that are dicey in either of those things, to grow or to sell ads, that could be justified. It means justify the ends because it's all doing this larger thing of connecting the world. So then you come to, hey, is connecting the world a good thing? They used to think totally, nothing that by definition, sharing and things with more people and having more people connected is a good thing. But they have learned that particularly when you grow so fast, you can't mitigate the possible consequences. It can be a bad thing. And they've seen terrible consequences that for years they tried to either ignore or just didn't deal with when it was pointed out to them. And now they can't ignore it. And they do say, and Mark Zuckerberg has said to me, yeah, I didn't realize how people would abuse this platform. How, there's a lot of people out there that when they're connected, they don't get better. Their behavior gets worse. And Facebook made it easier for them to exhibit bad behavior.
There's a real strange tension that it's sort of amazing to read the story of all the problems and the things which have completely diminished Facebook's reputation generally. You've called it their brand equities like that of a penny stock, but the real stock price is strong, and the financial results. I mean, I went to business school. I think I just have built into me the idea that that's not sustainable, that if your corporate reputation sucks, sooner or later it's going to show up in the numbers. But what's going on here with that?
Well, I don't know. Maybe there is a sort of a Wile E. Coyote principle going on here that, it takes a while for some of these negative effects to show up. One, it would be that Facebook is not as attractive a place to work anymore. It used to be tops in the place you go if you were a sharp young person coming out of college with an engineering degree. It used to be the kind of place where people wanted to be and felt good about what they were doing. Now they come home for Thanksgiving and all their relatives are saying, why are you working for that place? And I've had some top executives in Silicon Valley tell me, well, Facebook was once a place that rated us, but now we find it a fruitful place to raid ourselves.
Yeah, so there might just be a lag in catching up with gravity here. Wile E. Coyote eventually falls to the canyon.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's not many places for advertisers to go when they get bang for a buck like Facebook. So that'll take a while.
The issue of antitrust government action, I've been following the Democratic candidates for president, and even the more reasonable ones like Buttigieg have said big tech needs government scrutiny, regulation, just because it's big. That when these internet companies were small and frail, they were flowers that you needed to let grow, but now they're having too much impact on society. But when I read the book and I see the complexity of Zuckerberg and his team's reactions to these problems, and in some ways the real creativity that they've devoted to it, and I imagine how quickly the government could catch up with these problems and put rules down that would make the next horrors of this platform not take place. And I think you said that even the idea of breaking it up would take years, and Microsoft just waited till the next administration when they were actually, prosecuted successfully for that. But if you were advising Biden or whoever's president next on how to handle the kind of problem you've described here with Facebook from the government's point of view, are there even any levers to pull?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think if I were, legislating this or regulating it, I wouldn't look to say, let's second guess the decisions that Facebook made. I would go backwards. I'd say, what was the landscape that we have that allowed Facebook to cause such problems? If we allow companies to gather data and use it against people and do things behind the scenes, in terms of the data and micro-target advertising to them, what's wrong with our laws that we allow that to happen? So I feel that the way they should approach it is not to say Facebook is big and bad, Google is big and bad, Amazon is big and bad, Apple, all the rest of them. Let's regulate those companies. They should say, wait, what do people deserve in terms of protections from companies big and small? And let's put those into law, and those companies will follow the law, or we'll put them in jail. Yeah,
you kind of update the rules of the road that they have to follow.
Yeah. So, you could make an argument that Facebook was anti-competitive when it bought Instagram and WhatsApp. Actually, the regulatory agencies, they actually examined it for those, and they decided to let those go through. So, it's kind of a double jeopardy asking to second guess that. But even given that, you say, well, now we realize it's bad for society for one company to have that power, it would take so long to break them up. We will all be walking around with those, virtual reality headsets by then. But, the next vision would be happening. But effectively, what happened with Microsoft turned out to be actually effective in terms of more scrutiny because you're big, constrained the kinds of things you could do to curtail competitors, like buy them. So, Facebook is not buying TikTok because that would never go through.
In your journalism career, you've had some fascinating opportunities to see some of these major tech leaders, Jobs, now Zuckerberg, and then Bezos as well. You were covering him in the 90s. So you've had a pretty good look at three people who all have wonderful creation stories and huge success. When you think of them as individuals, and you've called Zuckerberg a learning machine, Jobs, is one of them a better person that would give you more trust to be driving such a huge company that has such effect on society, just on kind of a human, is this a good person or not?
Well, that's not usually the measure by which we evaluate a CEO. I mean, you take someone like Steve Jobs, who his personal bad behavior, sometimes as a boss, could be really tough. Though obviously a lot of people who work for him said it was the most inspirational thing in their lives, right? All these people, they are ultimately super driven, and some of them are beloved by their families, right? I mean, like, so what they have in common is that they are driven and resilient, and they see an opportunity early, specifically in technology. They understand it's possible to do something that most people don't realize it's possible to do, because people, grew up under previous, regimes of technology, and all of a sudden something new's come up, and you could, accomplish this that sounds crazy. And so you pursue that, and they all have the resilience to persist when people say, "You're nuts. This will never work." And so they're all single-minded in their vision. Some of them are a little more benevolent as bosses than others. Zuckerberg doesn't, yell at people, humiliate people like Steve Jobs did. Bezos has his issues with, employees over the years. But they have something in common, and that allowed them to accomplish what they did.
Do you think one of them is a faster learner than the others?
We're all pretty fast learners. And sometimes, and things they're not interested in, they don't learn as well. So in Facebook's case, the kind of policy things that Zuckerberg wasn't interested in were the things that he delegated to Sheryl Sandberg's side of the company, and they came back to bite Facebook.
Yeah. Having learned this much about Facebook, I'm curious what your own use of Facebook looks like.
I use it. I use it not only to find people inside Facebook to talk to, though you have to be careful if you're contacting people. Sometimes you want to just identify them on Facebook and contact them on direct message on Twitter or something. Or great if they're on Signal. But I use it in a personal sense. I use it. I have two family groups, one for relatives on my wife's side and one for relatives on my biological side, and we just use it to exchange pictures of closed groups, so I find uses for it that are fine. I use the privacy settings. I make sure as best I can that I'm cognizant of where my posts are going and who's seeing them. I use some measure of discretion in accepting friends, but it's semi-public, I think. So I get some use out of it, and I understand, though, also that, hey, there's my data is accumulating in that storehouse, and I try to apply the right degree of skepticism to stuff that I see fed to me. So I have bought T-shirts that have been offered to me that are pretty cool. They know that hey, he likes this band. Here's a T-shirt. A Mother of Invention T-shirt. How cool is that?
Yeah, makes sense. Now, the coronavirus is funny because I think there's something called pandemic mentioned in the book, and the sense of
they named their first big ad initiative Pandemic.
Yeah. And
that was the code name. That wasn't the release name, thank God. But it hit Facebook like a pandemic because there was one terrible product in there called Beacon that reported on your news feed what you bought at some other website, which was not a good idea. And the worst case scenario might have been someone buying a diamond ring for a girlfriend, or even worse, not a girlfriend. But
worse.
That happened. In terms of some guy hoping to surprise his girlfriend with a diamond ring, and she found about it on the Facebook newsfeed.
You're scheduled to do a session at South by Southwest on March 16th. Are you expecting that's going to take place, that they're going to have the conference, and that you're going to go, given what we don't know about the coronavirus?
Well, I just lost my moderator, so let me see what happens here. I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's a lot of discussions going on in Austin, right? And so we'll see what happens. It's look, this is a time where we have to face the reality here. Last night I was at the Computer History Museum, and they asked all the speakers to pick out one word, which means a lot to them, and the word I picked was truth. It means a lot to me in my career, and they said something with relevance to people in business, and that has a lot of relevance to people in business. So I think the people in Austin should really buckle down on what is true and real, rather than truth as they might want it to be. Exactly.
Can you say what you're working on next for a book?
Well, I have no firm book plans for the next book. I just spent 3 years on this.
Yeah.
And I think it might be fun and certainly happy situation for my employer if I were to just really be really productive for Wired this year. So I'm working on a really interesting story that I can't say what it is, but I started a newsletter for them, and which goes out every Friday. If you're a subscriber to Wired, it'll pop up in your mailbox.
I am. I get it. It's good.
Yeah. So I'll do that for a while and then think about the next book.
Did I miss anything?
No, it's good stuff.
Great. All right. Well, this will be up Friday. I'll send you a link, and I'm sure there's pictures of you I can put on the show notes. And I'm here in Cambridge, so if your travel brings you, I think you're scheduled at the Harvard Bookstore here next week.
Larry Lessig's going to interview me.
Yeah, that'll be wild. I don't know.
Yeah. I hope he doesn't sue me. But,
he's a wild card.
He's great. I love the guy. I did a profile of him for Wired years ago, and we got to be friendly.
Well, his paranoia level about Facebook, I would think, would be through the roof.
Well, that's why I thought it would be so much fun to have him interview me.
Yeah.
I try as much as possible my appearances to be interviewed, so I'm not just giving the same talk again and again, and I'm falling asleep halfway through it. So if it's an interviewer comes to me from a different angle, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well,
Well, come to the Harvard Bookstore.
Yeah. I'll be there 7 o'clock.
Wear a mask.
Yeah, exactly. I have been speaking with Steven Levy, the author of Facebook: The Inside Story, published last week. Thanks very much, Steven.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stephen mentioned a newsletter, and that newsletter is called Plain Text. It's fairly new. He started it in January, and I want to alert you that there's a good deal on it. If you pay $5 a year, you get the newsletter as a Wired subscriber, and you get a subscription to the print and digital version of Wired magazine, $5 for a whole year. Wired is I'm pretty sure this is right. It's the only magazine that I receive physically. I get a copy of it here at our house in Cambridge, and I really enjoy it. I've always, way back when it came out, it had this very odd design for a magazine, and it maintains that. But really, why I like reading it on paper is the articles are so thoughtful and so incisive about what's coming, and all aspects of technology, that I will confess that I just enjoy reading it on paper and drawing, underlining with a pen on paper. But if you thought you might like to give Wired a try, if this is a good deal, and you'll get this weekly newsletter that Steven is writing. He's taking a week off. I don't think this week there's one because he's had a very active book tour. As I mentioned, his book tour is going to bring him here to Cambridge, Massachusetts. I trust he'll get here if travel works out. It'd be just him and whoever he's traveling with, not a big group that will have to be canceled by somebody. It was going to be Friday, March 13th at 7 p.m. at the Harvard Bookstore, and that's at 1256 Mass Avenue. Happens to be directly across Mass Avenue from my freshman dorm at Harvard, Wigglesworth Hall, and I plan to get there early enough so that I can get a good seat and listen to it. The person that is going to be conducting the conversation with Steven is Larry Lessig, and he's a Harvard Law School professor, quite well known for having founded the Creative Commons nonprofit, and that was back in 2001, and it gave lots of tools for people to share their work under various kinds of releasing of rights, Creative Commons licenses, and I think he ran for president briefly, or at least formed an exploratory committee back in 2016, and a very thoughtful, incisive person. So to have him asking questions of Steven Levy about Facebook, I think is going to be not to be missed. And I've invited a childhood friend of mine, William Holmes, to come in from Western Massachusetts so that he and I can attend it, I hope, because I think he's going to enjoy it. He's my most tech-phobic friend, and so to be with him at a book event about Facebook with Larry Lessig there, that just sounds like too much intellectual fun for me. I hope it'll happen. Well, as I mentioned, South by Southwest has been canceled. I got word by a text message from my friend Brian Person in Austin, and it's pretty clear that South by was planning to hold the conference, and in a statement that they put out, you can hear the disappointment, and I'm sure there's lots of behind-the-scenes goings-on that led to this, but the leaders of the South by Southwest Conference said in a statement, the City of Austin has canceled the March dates for South by Southwest and South by Southwest EDU, that's education. South by Southwest will faithfully follow the city's directions. We are devastated to share this news with you. The show must go on is in our DNA, and this is the first time in 34 years that the March event will not take place. We are now working through the ramifications of this unprecedented situation. As recently as Wednesday, Austin Public Health stated that, quote, there's no evidence that closing South by Southwest or any other gatherings will make the community safer. However, this situation evolved rapidly, and we honor and respect the City of Austin's decision. We are committed to do our part to help protect our staff, attendees, and fellow Austinites. The conference goes on to say, we are exploring options to reschedule the event and are working to provide a virtual South by Southwest online experience as soon as possible for 2020 participants, starting with South by Southwest EDU. For our registrants, clients, and participants, we will be in touch as soon as possible, and we will publish an FAQ. That could be intriguing. There might be some things that I'll be able to attend virtually here in Cambridge, even if I don't have a chance to go to Austin. One thing I'm really disappointed about is that in my annual attendance at South by Southwest, I always stay with my cousin Peter Ty, who lives in Austin, and we have a great time catching up and going to barbecue joints. He's also a great cook himself. So I think when the dust settles on this thing, I'm just going to have to make a separate trip to Austin so that I can reconnect with Peter. And there's a lot of reasons to be disappointed, but it makes sense to me. I think the London book fair also got canceled today, and it's just looking like events that have large numbers of people attending. The organizers are just thinking it's not worth the risk to bring people together, especially when they're coming from all over the world, because various parts of the world are at different stages of this outbreak. And to have a huge event, I think South by Southwest could easily have had several 100,000 people in attendance. That it's an understandable thing that the city fathers would have decided it just wasn't worth the risk. I want to end up with a tech tip having to do with the Morning Journal, and I had a question from my friend Ben Beach, because if you have enabled the Morning Journal, which you can do just by saying, Alexa, enable Morning Journal, then when you say what's new in the morning, you'll hear a flash briefing that I do each day. And if you've got other flash briefings, like Ben has some news flash briefings, you have to go through the various ones before you get to the Morning Journal. It turns out, and I figured this out in a lengthy tech support call with the Alexa team, you can ask for a specific flash briefing by name, and in my case what you would do is say, Alexa, play my Morning Journal flash briefing, and at that point she picks out the specific flash briefing, the Morning Journal. Alexa, stop. And so you can jump right to it. You could say, play my NPR flash briefing, or whichever one you wanted to hear specifically. You do have a way to go to it rather than cycle through. The other thing you can do for cycling through is you can just say next, and it'll kind of fast forward to the one that you want to go to. I have an idea for next week's show that I haven't been able to confirm yet. Let me check my phone to see if I've got a text message on it. But there's a great guy that lives here in Cambridge, and he's married to my first wife, Richard Curtin, married to my first wife, Amanda, from many years ago. And he doesn't have a cell phone, and he hasn't ever had a cell phone, and he is this delightful guy. He's a Reiki master and a therapist, and he is moving through the world in 2020. He doesn't have a clam. He doesn't have any kind of a cell phone at all. And my daughter Sarah was telling me about it at supper last night, and I just thought, gosh, it would be great to sit down with Dusty and just find out, what it's like and what are the pros and cons, and I think that I've always admired his ability to have such a distinctive profile in technology, and it's not an angry profile. He's not like a technology hater. He's a very happy, easygoing guy. Maybe because he's unencumbered with a screen that he's looking at all the time. I don't know, but in any event, and then my idea was that he and I would sit down at the Staples podcasting studio here in Cambridge, and we'd have the benefit of the great microphones and the setups and record a conversation. But anyway, my ex-wife is used to my coming up with odd ideas from time to time, and she may think this is one of the stranger ones that I've put forth. But if all goes well, you'll hear from Dusty next week, and if not, we'll have somebody else that we'll be talking to. Thanks for listening, and hope you stay safe and wash your hands. We really do have some kind of a historic event unfolding across the world. And I said in my Morning Journal this morning that there was something about Steven Levy's emphasis on just getting the Facebook story right, daring to say his purpose was to tell the truth about the company, that resonated with me, that when you've got something like this, it's life or death. I'm not so interested in people's opinions about it and whether President Trump is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And the value of punditry on this seems to recede, and people like Steven Levy, who have spent decades honing their ability to find out the way things really are and then writing about it in a clear way. I think it's a time for those voices. And, there have been others in my experience, James Fallows at The Atlantic, who I knew back at the Crimson at Harvard, and Pete Williams, an amazing NBC reporter who covers the Supreme Court, and who I knew in Casper, Wyoming, when he was at the local K2 station there. Some of these people that have spent their careers doing kind of old-fashioned journalism, I have a feeling that as this epidemic or pandemic unfolds, we're just going to gravitate toward them and figure it's not really a good use of time to be listening to angry voices on one side or another. That it's just a time to try to figure out what's true, and therefore what's the next right thing that each of us needs to do, whether we're running a big conference like South by Southwest or just trying to figure out how much toilet paper we should have in the house, or how we should be helping our families to prepare for what might be coming. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Thanks for listening. Bye.